I have been super productive lately, and the only thing I've been doing different is using this use first bin. And you can use any bin you want, of course. The point of it is about having an area set aside of yarns you want to use first to get out of your stash, just like you would food that's going to expire. And while yarn's not going to expire, I need the visual reminder, because if I don't see it, I forget it exists. And maybe you're like this too. But by having this bin for me to pick from, it really helped me go through yarns that had been sitting around for a while and I knew I wanted to use, but it just kind of slipped to the back burner. And don't get me wrong, I did throw in one new skein of yarn into my use first bin after I bought it. And that's perfectly fine too, because I wanted to use it right away. So it went in with the other yarns I wanted to use. Why don't we go ahead and get started, and I'll show you what I made, because I'm really excited to have these projects done. You know, with my videos, nothing I say is a hard and fast rule. Take everything and mix it in with your own style and, your own temperament and your own habits. But for me, this really helped. You may have already seen the first thing I made, and it was this shawl right here. And I made this out of 3 balls of Drops Fable print in the color chocolate. And I really like how this scarf turned out. I've got a video I did. It was a collab with Slow Crochet. I will link the video up here that I did, and you can find out like any details you want. I've got like links to the yarn, link to the pattern and all that stuff. I'd had this Drops yarn for a while, and in conjunction with the video we were making, I knew it was the yarn I wanted to use. As I was setting up my use first bin, I went ahead and just immediately put in the Drops Fable. And that got 3 small yarn balls out of my stash right there. And I love the project. I'm trying to slow down a little bit when I show the project so you can actually see the stitches. I feel like in the past I've been a little too quick and maybe you're not able to see as well as you would like. The next thing I made was this beanie. Go ahead and slide it on. And I made this out of Hometown yarn. It is a 6 weight. It's 81 yards. It's acrylic. And this is the color Hoboken Honey. I don't know if this is a yarn that is still available or if it's discontinued. I did happen to thrift this one for $2. I knew I liked it. I knew it would be a great hat. So here is my chunky beanie in Hoboken Honey. And I'm going to interrupt myself here for just a second and say that when I'm wanting to do a project or get several projects done, in kind of a hurry, I like to go to tried and true trusted patterns that I know will fit and I know I like how they work and I understand the pattern. I actually talked a little bit about that in a Christmas video I did, and I'll link that video because it doesn't have to be for Christmas. It's just along the lines of when you're wanting to get quite a few projects done. I've got some tips and tricks of kind of doing like your own little assembly line and keeping things simple. But one of the main things is that if you're trying to kind of crank a lot out at once, it's not always the best time to go out searching for new patterns. So I'll link that up here if you're interested in watching that. This is going to be one of those videos where I end up with crazy hair. I can already tell that. Now this next hat is the same pattern, but it did work up a little bit differently just because the yarn is quite a bit different. This is actually much softer. It is Premier yarn. It's from the Deborah Norville collection. It's Serenity Chunky Weight. The color is After Dark. And so these two hats are the exact same pattern, but you can see how this one is definitely a little bit looser weave. I use the same 10mm hook on both of these. I will link the original creator of these hats down in the description box. The only thing I've noticed is that I don't know if it was a mistake in her video and she like corrected it in the comments. I don't know, but I believe in the video she's using like an 8 or an 8.5 millimeter hook, and I have always had to use a 10 millimeter hook for these hats, and I have made a bunch of them. And I know my head is a little bit big, but I just know like there was no chance when I had started making one with the 8.5, there was no way it was fitting. That's the one thing I would recommend if you go to make this hat pattern, is definitely use a 10 millimeter hook. These next two hats are also the same pattern. I have been making my like beanies like this for a while, just like a basic stocking cap. I like to use half double crochets in the back loop. I always do the very first and the very top last row, so the first and the last, I always do in both loops. And I just like how it gives it a little bit more of a solid bottom down here, and it just seems a little bit more even. It's a tiny minute detail that probably doesn't matter. I just like how I feel like it looks a little bit more finished. The other thing I do when making these beanies is that the last 5 stitches before I get to the end, just on the one side, not both, just on the one side, I always do single crochets for those last 5, because it brings it in a little bit more, makes it smaller at the top so that there's less to cinch up when you cinch it up. And I have a video where I did a scrappy beanie with the same pattern, and I'll go ahead and link it either above or in the description box if you want to see how I made that hat exactly. But it is super duper simple. So let me throw this on here real quick and I'll tell you about the yarn. Now, I love wearing my hats as like a slouchy type of beanie right there. I like it kind of bulky and hanging down, but you could just as easily wear this with a brim if you like it better like that. For when I wear them, I usually wear them more as an accessory and not so much like a cold weather. Sorry, my nose is itching. There's like so much fiber in the air. Like I would just wear this, you know, like with my cardigan like this. I'm not wearing it like out to shovel snow in. And this particular yarn I had been hanging on to for a while because I really loved it. I had gotten it several years ago at a Hobby Lobby clearance sale, and it is Lion brand ice cream yarn, cotton blend. And I had previously made like some coasters out of it for a friend, and I really liked how like squishy and everything the yarn is. I have a little bit left here if you want to see what it looks like, but it's pretty much almost an exact 50-50 cotton polyester blend. I really love how this yarn feels, and I love kind of like the soft muted colors in it. It's a 4-weight, yeah, it's 47% cotton and 53 acrylic. It was 3.5 ounces, 225 yards, and this was the color chocolate. So I had been holding on to this until I could find a project that I wanted to make with it, getting all my labels piled up over there. And what I did, because I wasn't sure that I would have enough of this at all, is I paired it with this Hirschner's Afghan yarn, which you know I'm always talking about. It's a 2-weight acrylic, and I thought this is the color Peanut, and I just thought it went really well with this like neutral taupe that's in here. I'm trying to find like a little chunk of it right here. So like that's the neutral taupe, and I just thought that went well. Like, you know, this wasn't overly warm, so, you know, whatever. I don't know how much of this I used, maybe half, probably a little less than half. And I absolutely love how my hat turned out. I feel like it's a little more lightweight, so I can wear this maybe a little bit further into the spring and, you know, pull it out a little bit further pull it out a little bit earlier in the fall. But I love it. It's nice and squishy, and I made it super duper slouchy because that's just how I like it. My hair's getting out of control here. So I've already worn this one several times. Again, exact same pattern. but I'm absolutely loving this. And this is one of the new ones I picked up, and I'm not finding the label at all. But it was the Big Twist Tweed that I just purchased, and I had a video where I unboxed it, and I will link that above right here. I just really like this tweed. It was a nice soft yarn. It's a budget acrylic yarn. I'm a little suspicious that the tweeds are going to come off of it if I were to throw it in the washer. But out of the one skein, I was actually able to make 2 hats. So let me get the other one. You guys, I looked everywhere, and I know it's because I wore the hat already and I didn't just leave it in here. I knew I'd be filming, but for whatever reason, I guess I was just so excited to wear the hat. Like, I just went and looked in my bedroom and I can't find it. So I don't know where it is, but not super professional. But it is, you know, this same tweed right here, but I did it out of this pattern right here, which is a pattern from Little John Yarn. And it's like a granny stripe hat. So imagine this if it was this. I'm annoyed. I'm so sorry. What I will do is when I find the hat, I'm going to take a picture of myself wearing it and I'll throw it up on the community tab. So you know I'm not nuts and I did not hallucinate making a hat like this out of this. And then I did have one more hat that I made out of the same pattern. And this one is definitely a little bit warmer. So this is made out of Hobby Lobby's I Love This wool. I did thrift this for 75 cents. It is 93% wool and 7% polyamide. I know they still carry some I Love This wool, but I don't know if I have seen a multicolor. I haven't looked at it too closely, to be honest. When I've glanced, I swear I've just seen like just straight up plain solid color neutrals. But here is the little bit, actually, I mean, it's a decent amount that I have left. And you can see it's kind of like muted autumnal colors. They call this color Navajo. And I do like a lot of those southwestern type of colors, so that would explain it. But again, I didn't know how much I would have and if I would have enough to do a whole hat. And I probably would have, but sometimes variegated yarns are just a little too busy for me. So I ended up using this Hirschner's Afghan yarn. Do you ever get tired of hearing me say Hirschner's Afghan yarn? This is the color Deep Teal. I had bought this for my failed temperature blanket. If you would like to know more about that, I do have a playlist, and I'm actually going to be talking temperature blankets with Kristen from Kristen Crochets in a short while. So we're going to go ahead and do a live about that, and she has had much more success with temperature blankets than I have. But since I had this on, you know, in my stash, and I just thought it paired really well, and I really like how it just kind of, I feel like it brightened up a little bit of the muted colors, and I feel like the muted colors kind of help tone down the bright teal. Well, they call it deep teal. But I just like how pairing the two together, it doesn't make it seem as variegated, if that makes sense. Like if you're a person like me who just isn't like drawn to super colorful things and just wants to tone it down a little bit more. I probably could have done like a brown, and you know, maybe I would have liked that more, but I do like this. It is definitely a little bit brighter, but I do really like it. But since this one has so much wool in it, this is probably just going to be like exclusively cold weather. I am going to interrupt myself a little bit because even though I couldn't find the other hat or the label, this is what I had left of that Big Twist tweed after making 2 stocking caps out of it. So I am pretty pleased with that. There may be enough to make a headband here, but probably not. But I am going to keep it since it's brown, and I could always pair it with some Hirschner's Afghan yarn, right? All right, I am done with hats and I am moving on to cowls. I told you, I feel like I was super productive. I feel like this use first bin helped me like hone in and focus instead of coming up here and getting distracted by all the pretty pretty yarns I have, and then thinking, oh, what could I do with this? Like my eyes just boom, right to the bin. But let me say, I would not hold myself to that. Like I'm not so strict that, like I know I can be rigid, but I'm not so strict that like I'm not going to allow myself to do a different project or to not do a different yarn if I didn't want to. I am super duper excited about this cowl. And this was some yarn I got on clearance. It's Yarn Bees Cotton XXL in the color Cognac. I had 2 of these skeins, so they were each 50-yard skeins. So I was definitely concerned that I wouldn't get very far or be able to make very much. And I just made a bunch of hats, so I didn't think I really wanted to do another hat like that. And I'm very pleased with this cowl. Now, is it super fancy? No. Are there probably better cowls out there to make? Yes. But guess what? I just kind of made it up and I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with the yarn and I love how it worked. I love how it feels. I love that it has like that bulky, thick look, but since it's cotton, it really doesn't feel that bad at all. Like it doesn't, like it feels less than, you know, this wool hat, even though this is 4-weight yarn and this is they claim this was 5-weight yarn, but it definitely had all the texture in it and it kind of worked up a little more like a 6-weight. Like I can't believe how far only 100 yards of this went. So let me show you what I did here real quick. I just made a big tube with it. So super duper simple. If you can see just how easy that was. And I just kind of chained until I liked the length of it and just held it up to my body. And then I proceeded to do treble crochets, chain space, treble crochets, chain space. Then the next row I did down here was single crochet, chain, single crochet, chain. Then I went to the trebles. Then I did 2 rows in the middle here of my single crochet chain. And basically, I just wanted to give it a little more variation. And I also wasn't sure how far that first skein was going to get me. And I did kind of wanted it to be symmetrical. It definitely wouldn't have had to been. And I was able to also put in single crochets around the top of it, I guess you'd say. And then I went through and at the bottom in my foundation chain, but up here, I did not have enough yarn to do single crochets, so I had to frog that out. And I went ahead and just did a slip stitch around the edge here, just to make it a little more solid and feel like it was a little more polished. I'm super happy with this super basic cowl. And can I say, I think that this type of yarn, let me see if I have a scrap. Okay, here's a scrap. So this type of yarn right here, where it has that texture, I'm in love with this now. This was the first time I had, used this in like this size, and I absolutely love it. And the reason I do is because I think it took a stitch like this treble and it just gave it so much extra texture. And sometimes I feel like when doing long stitches like this, that the yarn can sometimes look a little bit sloppy if my tension isn't like just perfect, if that makes sense. If you've ever had that happen or you know what I'm talking about, give me a like or write it in the comments and be like, yeah, that happens to me too. But I just think sometimes long stitches look sloppy, and the texture of that here totally gets rid of that. I'm not describing that very well, but because of the texture, you're not seeing like pieces that might be a little bit loose. And I just can't say it enough. I am just absolutely loving this texture of yarn. Would I want to do every project out of it? Absolutely not. If you're trying to do a project that you want a lot of stitch definition for, this isn't going to be your yarn. But if you're doing a project where you don't want the stitch definition and you want texture, this is your yarn. I am definitely going to look for more of this type in the future. I mean, I just I'm surprised at how much I like this project for a project that I just kind of winged it. It was just fun. I'm happy with it, and it's in the color palette of clothes that I'm trying to kind of build my wardrobe on, so I should be able to wear this with a bunch of different things that I have. You may or may not have seen me pick out this yarn and pick the project. I will go ahead and I will link that up here if you would like to see that video where I kind of walked through some questions to ask about how to find the right yarn for the right project and what's the right project for you. Because the right project for me might be completely different than the right project for you. I have one last yarn to show you, one last project to show you. It is not for the faint of heart. This is not a summer project right here, but this is a yarn that has been in my stash for several years. It is Big Twist Ribbon. And I got this on clearance at Joann. And I specifically remember the clearance tag says $2.47, but I remember getting it on a weekend where the yarn was an additional 25% off clearance. So it would have been right around $2 or just under $2. It's a hand washed. It does say you can tumble dry it, but I'm not going to, and this would be like a 7-weight yarn. And there was only 16.5 yards per skein. And I had 3 skeins of this. They were pretty big and bulky, and they were definitely taking up room in my stash. And I was kind of confused. I didn't know if I was going to need to try to make like a basket out of it, which I'm glad I didn't. I am going to show you this yarn. This is not a yarn that Joann sells anymore, but I know Premier, at least at one point, had a ribbon yarn that I suspected was very similar to this. You can see how it is like a flat tube. And, you can see inside there where there's like if I pull it apart, it's kind of like netting a little bit. It was kind of weird to work with, and this is super stiff and super bulky. What I did for my cowl here was very similar to the last one. Let me slip it off. So with this project, I knew it would be pretty stiff. I went ahead and did my foundation chain, again, just kind of getting it to about the length I was eyeballing. Then I did a row of double crochet, and then I did a row of single crochet, row of double crochet, row of single crochet. So very simple, but I did it like the Mobius style. And I have never been able to successfully complete like the Mobius chain on like a shawl, or not a shawl, but like a Mobius wrap on something using 4-weight yarn. I've always gotten my chain twisted, so it's not right. And for whatever reason, probably because this was so ginormous and the chain was small enough, I was actually able to do it. So I was super duper psyched about that. And I think it actually works out a lot better with this yarn because, it's got the twist built into it. So I'm not trying to twist it on me because I just don't think that would work with the thickness of this. It's like, you can see it's got like a weird stiff shape. I would never buy this yarn again. Let me say that. It was neat, but I would never buy it again. I would also not use this yarn to make a gift for someone or to sell, because I actually had kind of a hard time with the ends. So, this small cowl was 3 skeins of that yarn. So I had quite a few ends that I had tied together. And then of course my starting chain and then the end. It was way too big for any of the yarn needles I had. I used like a giant, is it like a Q hook to make this? So I went down and I was using, I believe, an 11.5, because what is a Q? Is it like a 15? I think it's a 15. To weave in my ends, I went down to like an 11.5, and I was just kind of weaving them through and getting them through as many as I could. But then you can see, like, here's the little tuft. Can you see that right there. I just decided, like, I'm done messing with that. Like, I'm not messing with it anymore. So for me, this is definitely a personal use only yarn. I do like it. I love the color. I love how deep it is, and I'm assuming is going to be pretty warm. It's definitely heavy, definitely like a fun accessory for the winter time. I mean, I know it's got to be hand wash, and I'm a little skeptical about the ends there. Definitely something for me just to kind of use myself and not have to worry that someone else gonna have problems with those ends. So I used up 11 skeins or balls of yarn just from using this use first bin. You know, I did throw in a couple other yarns to use just to make these work a little bit better. I actually didn't go through everything in it. I have 2 balls of this Crafter's Secret Cotton in brown that I thought I wanted to make a project out of, and I kind of was like mulling around the idea, but I'm gonna go ahead and throw these back in my cotton tote. I think I'm gonna go ahead, I feel like I went through enough yarns that I can look at it a little more realistically and be like, what do I really want to work with next? What do I not? And this can go back in my cotton yarn stash. But using up 11 skeins of yarn, I feel like is like, like that seems like a big deal to me. Like, I'm excited because these are yarns I loved, or at least love the idea of. And I'm so happy with the projects I made myself. I've decided I just want to make projects that I enjoy, and instead of putting it off and like leaving it there and then thinking I'll get to it someday. I don't want to do that anymore. And my use first bin was a success for me. I don't know if you're the same personality type as me, or I don't know, maybe you're much better at remembering the stuff you have, or better at actually executing the plans you want to. But for me, this worked out great, and this is literally just a bin from the Dollar Tree, so any bin will do. But if this can help you, I would just love to pass that little tidbit along, because I would love it if you would feel like that same sense of satisfaction that I am feeling right now. You are wonderful, and I appreciate you hanging out with me today and talking yarn, and I look forward to talking yarn again with you soon. Bye.